Okay, Justin, so before I actually get into the PDF page 2 for the simplifying, I was looking at some of the answers and I wanted to clarify a few things because I actually on number 7 went further than your teacher did, and this answer that we came up with down here is actually more than what she really wants you guys to do. So, and again, this all varies on the teacher, so her answer, she just ended it a little short, which is fine. But in blue here, this is what her answer is. And if you notice what we did, x to the 3/8, that's right here. Y to the 3/8, that was right here, and that's what she got. X to the 16/3, that's right here. And then all she did, so we had y to the 8/3 and y to the -1. All she did was then flip those and got that answer. So our numbers are all the same. I just down here then took it further, which you can do. It's, again, as you can see, a little bit more complicated. So maybe on your test you may ask her if she wants to go farther, or bring a question and say, how do I know whether to stop here, or how do I know whether you want me to stop here or continue on down to the answer. Then I also looked at this one right here, which I think was number 8, and I think she may have wrote the problem down wrong. I was looking at it and it was a little hard for me to read because the pencil was a little faded, but her original problem looked like this, and then when she went to write this problem, I think she made this 4 into a 2 before she actually started solving things. At some point that she changed that 4 from 5/4 to 5/2, and then all the way down into it. So her answer looked like 15/2. We got 15/4 because I don't think there was anywhere to change that number. So you may double check that with her, because I think that she may have just made a simple, over here when she recopied the problem, she accidentally made that a 2 instead of a 4, because nothing else changed. So I think that might have been it. So anyway, I just wanted all the answers that we got with these, this one, this one, this one, they all lined up. And again, this one did as well. We just took it further, whereas she actually stopped up here with this. So anyway, so let's continue on to the next set of problems. So with this problem, I'm actually going to use pen because it's a little darker. With these problems, you're just working with radicals. And again, I don't know if you need help with this or not. If not, then just move on. If so, then maybe watch through this video. So with all these radicals, you're just simplifying radicals, and there's a few different ways to do it. So with problems like this, when they're asking you for the square root, what I like to do is to basically use a factor tree and break down what goes into this problem right here. And so I think for this one, I think 128, what's that, 64 times 2. And then you can go further. 64 is 8 and 8, 4 and 2, 4 and 2, 2 and 2, and then 2 and 2. So basically we factored it so we factored it down into our prime numbers, which are basically all 2's. So when we're taking the square root of something, that means we want to take a pair of 2's out. So if there's a pair of 2's here, we're going to pull a 2 out. If there's a pair of 2's here, we're going to pull another pair of 2's out. Another 2 out, because 2 times 2 is 4. If you took the square root of 4, that's where that 2 comes from. So we're just basically taking the square root of 4's, and to get the 4, it's just 2 times 2. So 2 times 2, so that's another 4. So if we take the square root of that, that's 2. Now we have this 2 left over here. So whatever is left over remains in the radical. Now with the 5, the x to the 5th, again, that means x times x times x times x times x. So there's 5 of them. And when you take the square root, again, you just want to take out square roots. You want to take out pairs. So you're going to pull out 1x for that. And then because we have another pair, you're going to pull out another x. And then the non-pair the one left over stays inside. So for every pair, you pull out one variable, or one, in this case, 1x. So if we were to simplify all that, that's 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8, and then x times x, x squared, 2 to the x. Now you're probably asking yourself, well, what about this 10 out front? Well, that 10 we don't really have to do anything with until the very end. You just multiply it, so 10 times that, so that gives you negative 80 x squared radical 2x. So then that would be your answer there, because you can't, when you're taking the square root, there's nothing left in here to take the square root of. If there was a 4 here, then we could take the square root of it, but because you can't take the square root of 2, can't take the square root of x, that's all you really, that's how you know when you're finished, is nothing left inside the radical you can't take the square root of anything in here. So then I think number 2 is a similar type problem, so go ahead and work on that. Now number 3, this is basically a rule that says you can't have radicals in the denominator. So I don't know if you remember or not, but to get rid of that, you just multiply the top and bottom by whatever the radical is. So if it's radical 3, top and bottom by radical 3. So that when you're multiplying radicals, you just multiply what's ever inside. So 2 times 3 is 6, so it's radical 6 on the top. And then if you were to multiply that out, that would be radical 9. We can't take the square root of 6, so that stays square root of 6. Square root of 9 is 3. So then that would be your answer. And usually the question here is rationalize the denominator. Sometimes those are the instructions. Again, it all kind of depends on your teacher. So this next problem here, I actually just drew a line through it, so I'll rewrite it here. 3 over 3 radical 5. So with this one right here, it's the same idea as up here. You've got a radical in the bottom, we got to get that radical out of there, so you can't have a number that has a radical in the denominator. So again, all you need, even though there's another 3 down here, you don't need to multiply by this 3. You just need to multiply the top and the bottom by whatever the radical and what's ever underneath it. So we don't need to change anything down. We don't need to put a 3 in here. I mean, you can, but it would just result in some extra reducing at the end. So 3 times radical 5. Now because this is not in the radical, you want to multiply 3 by the number that's in front of the radical, which in this case is 1. So 3 times 1, just 3 radical 5. If this were in the radical, if it was radical 3 times radical 5, that would be radical 15. But in this case, it looks like that. 3 times radical 5 times 5 is 25. So again, can't simplify anything up there, so that stays 3 radical 5. Square root of 25 is 5, so it's 3 times 5 on the bottom. So 3 radical 5 over 15, and then you can reduce what's outside the radical. Stuff inside the radical is kind of, you can't touch it, you got to leave that alone. But outside the radical is fair game, so 3 goes into 15 once, or 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 15 5 times, so then that's your answer. Now even though that there's a 5 inside the radical and a 5 outside, these numbers are different. So if you took the square root of 5, it would be like 2 point whatever, you wouldn't be able to cancel that out with the 5. So if it's inside the radical and outside, you just got to leave those alone. So that would be your answer. Same thing up here. Even though 3 does go into 6, it's a radical 6. So don't let that confuse you. It's not 3 doesn't go into radical 6 at all. That's like 2 point something as well. So you can't reduce that. If it was just plain old 6, or if it was radical 3 on the bottom, then you could reduce them. But when you have a non-radical and a radical, you can't reduce those. Now number 5, same idea here. You want to get that radical out of the denominator. So multiply top and bottom by radical 15. Now what's tricky about this one And it's not even really that tricky, you just got to know what to do. Here you just want to distribute. So radical 15 times negative 5 is negative 5 radical 15 plus radical 5 times 3 radical 3 is radical 45, and you're in good shape there. And on the bottom, radical 5 times radical 5, I think that's 225. So then all you need to do is, you can leave the top alone for the time being. Radical 5 times radical 15 plus radical 45 all over the square root of that, which is just 15. So you could leave your answer there. Again, so let me slide this over so you can see what we're looking at here. You could leave this the way it is, or you could simplify it, depending on your teacher. If you're going to simplify radical 45, 9 and 5 go into that. You can take the square root of 9, but you can't really take the square root of 5, so then that square root of 9 becomes 3 radical 5. And so if you were going to rewrite this with this simplified version, it'd be negative 5 radical 15 plus 3 radical 5 all over 15. There's really nothing, by simplifying that, it doesn't really change anything. But so you could technically, I'm assuming, leave your answer like this and be okay. So for this last one, it requires a little bit of work. You're going to want to multiply this by something called the conjugate. Now I don't know if she talked or what she told you guys about the conjugate, but to figure out what the conjugate is actually pretty simple. You just take this bottom number and take the opposite of the radical. So if this is 1 minus radical 5, it becomes 1 plus radical 5. And this right here is your conjugate. So then you just take this conjugate and you multiply the top and bottom by it. 1 plus radical 5, negative 1 plus radical 5. So again, notice the difference. It's negative here, and then the conjugate's positive. That's the only thing that changes. This negative stays the same. So then you just distribute 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2, plus 2 times radical 5, which is 2 radical 5. Now down here is a little bit tricky. You have to use, and I'll do this kind of off to the side here, have to use FOIL. So you do the first terms, negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. The outside terms, negative 1 times radical 5 is negative radical 5. Inside, negative 1 times negative radical 5 is positive radical 5. And then the last, negative radical 5 times negative radical, or positive radical 5 is negative radical 25. So if we're simplifying this FOIL here, the negative radical 5 and the positive radical 5, that's going to cancel out. So then you have 1 minus square root of 25 is 5, so 1 minus 5, which is equal to negative 4. So then your answer up there would be negative 4. Now, to simplify this, you've got negative 2 and 2, so you can factor out, because you have a 2 and a 2 here, you can factor a 2 out of there, so it becomes negative, or pull out a, I guess it really doesn't matter, you could pull out a positive 2. Well, in this case, actually, let's take out, because that first one's negative, let's take out a negative 2. So if I take a negative 2 out of here, that becomes 1 plus, or actually 1 minus, because we want to divide both of these by negative 2 when we're factoring. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. Positive 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. Then that radical 5 stays in there. And that's all over the negative 4. So again, all we did was factor out a negative 2. And then now once you factor that out, you can simplify this so that 2 and that 4 cancel. And that becomes a 1. And it's actually because they're both negative, it becomes a positive 1. And then a 2, so then your overall answer will look like this, and it'll be, so because that canceled out, all we have left is what's on top here, 1 minus 1 radical 5 all over 2, and that is your answer here. So again, kind of looking back at all this, I know there's kind of a lot of writing going on here. I'll kind of try to box in the individual problems here, but it might actually be more beneficial to kind of go back and just watch these problems done one at a time. And again, I recommend you doing these problems and then watching the video and see, and then you can kind of follow step by step and see where you get stuck, and that should help. So when you're good with this one, go ahead and watch the third and last video. Hope you're feeling better.